Welcome to the Zeducation Podcast, where it's all about helping people and organizations unleash their greatness. Hosted by me, Pasitawa Haufano, and my brother, that's me, Kalolo Haufano. The Zeducation Podcast features lively discussions.
When they share it, you see that they're beginning to feel empowered.
My heart, it's full of pride for me to be Tamaita Samoa.
As well as tips on leadership and business by some of the top minds and influencers around the world.
You don't necessarily need a degree these days. There's so many pathways to success.
Welcome to the Zeducation Podcast. Welcome to our Zeducation Podcast episode today. We are thrilled to have Birgette McCarthy on our podcast discussing youth suicide prevention tips for parents. Birgette, a Ph.D. candidate at Auckland University, brings a vital message that a child is a parent's greatest gift. Prevention is the key to saving our children. Her work shines a light on the powerful role that parents play in their children's lives. She emphasizes the importance of listening, understanding, and being there for our tamariki, our children. With her insights, we can learn how to be better listeners, communicators, and supporters for our youth. So join us for an enlightening conversation with Birgette, where we explore simple yet impactful ways where parents can help keep their children safe and foster an environment of trust and open communication. Thank you for coming on our show today, Birgette.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, as always with our guests, we like to ask them to share something interesting about themselves.
Interesting. Okay. What's an interesting thing about me? I got to meet Beyonce back in the old days.
Like in person?
That was probably my like probably, which was part of Destiny's Child. So back in the old days, they did a, My Fame's still around. They did a My Fame competition, and you had to sing. People got to vote on a few on who would win. And yeah, I won. So I got to meet Beyonce and Kelly Rowland, and that was probably the highlight of my entire life.
That is
so that's my interesting, probably one of my interesting facts of my past.
That's awesome. Not many people can say they've met Beyonce.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure you got a photo somewhere ready to prove it.
I wasn't allowed. Yeah, I was in the Herald a few times, but I wasn't allowed to have a photo with them. So it was a bit of a bummer.
Yeah.
But it was cool.
Well, that's cool, and I believe you. Well, that's awesome. Fantastic. Yeah. Well, that's definitely interesting. Well, look, thank you. The reason we got you on the show is obviously it's a very sensitive topic when we're talking about suicide prevention and we're talking about youth. It's a very sensitive topic, especially for many parents and those who might have experienced it or have some sort of association with it, right? That's happened to them or around them. But tell us a little bit about why you were so interested in suicide prevention.
Okay. There were a few different factors. I think it started off when I had a job. I was working with an organisation called Tyler, and we worked alongside the Avondale Police with at-high-risk youth, mostly with high schools around West Auckland. So as part of that role, I had to develop youth programs or self-empowerment programs for young women. I also got opportunities to do kind of therapy work in a small group setting and also one-on-one counselling type sessions. So through these sessions, I started to see reoccurring themes amongst the young people that were having, personal chats with me. And those themes were coming about that there was a lot of suicide ideation going on and definitely a lot of self-harm happening. And these girls were aged probably between 13 to 17, mostly Māori and Pacific descent that were in these groups. And the themes that were coming through around why they had such strong suicide ideation were around the connection with whānau or family. And so that it stood out to me, and it was very interesting that it was a consistent theme that was coming in. As a parent of a teenage girl myself, I didn't comprehend, I suppose, the feelings of the young person and how serious that disconnection or lack of relationship that I thought I had with even my own daughter, how it really affected the teenagers. And so that initially was my first aha moment, I suppose, about, this is an issue. We need to definitely look more into this. And probably the second factor that made me follow through with my master research around it was I had a family member who passed away And so that was on my Samoan side. It was a cousin in Australia. And I think that process around how sudden it was and how much of a shock it was, and watching my uncle and auntie go through that with, I suppose, just complete kind of horror, around what did we do wrong? Like, why didn't we see this coming? Is there something we could have done differently? It really struck a chord with me. It was like, this is not okay. Like, we need to look more into this. How can we prevent this from happening to other whānau or, to other families out there? And so those two main factors were kind of a reason I decided to go onto this path to kind of research more.
And I can totally understand that. As you share that, I mean, it's something that hits close to home because it's happened to a family member. And also just being involved and immersed in that kind of work as a counsellor, you're being exposed and you're hearing these stories. I mean, how can you not listen to all of that and feel something, And that's driven you to do your research, which is a great why and a purpose behind that. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about your research? Maybe summarize it for us and what were some of the key findings from that?
Okay, so with the research that I did, it was interviewing parents, and the kind of goal behind it was to find strategies for them to better respond to and to kind of, see signs. You can't really always pinpoint a sign as to suicide, but there are some kind of preventative factors that you can do towards it. So we interviewed seven lots of parents from all different backgrounds. So we had solo parents, we had Pacific parents, Māori parents, and European parents, and we did this over it was through COVID actually. So it was over about a year period with these interviews, and a lot of them were done online, which was a massive challenge in itself with such a sensitive topic. It was really difficult, but I'm always grateful for these parents that came forward. It's probably one of the most devastating things you could experience as a parent, and for them to come forward and so eagerly as well. They didn't want other parents to have to go through this. We did interviews. We had a set of questions that we asked them. We kind of came, again, there wasn't an exact kind of outcome I could probably give you as to what we discovered, but we did definitely see reoccurring themes that were already people had already researched, but also new ones. And the emerging themes were definitely more around relationship building, kind of getting into the lens of the young person and what they're seeing and what they're experiencing, as opposed to where we come from as parents. So connection, trauma was huge. Trauma is in just life experiences. So, for example, parents divorcing was a big factor. For the older youth, it was maybe relationship breakdowns between boyfriends and girlfriends, financial debt. Just things like that kind of were massive triggering points leading up to the suicide that happened amongst these families.
Is there something in these events that really, I mean, obviously they're very emotionally heavy, like breaking up with someone that you really care about, or your parents, that you really love, and seeing them split up and divorce, like that has a huge emotional weight behind that. For a kid to be able how do I deal with that? And they're still developing, they're still growing, and how do they deal with and navigate those challenges?
Yeah, and I think as well, on top of that, mum and dad are going through their things as well. And sometimes kids can put on a front to say, no, I'm okay. You guys, I see mum hurting, I see dad hurting, I don't want to bother them. I'll just kind of fade into the background. And that unfortunately in itself is something that causes a lot of the suicide ideation to carry forward of what they end up doing. And it's a tricky kind of space to be in because, like I said, parents are kind of going through their own grief of what they're processing. So I think it's could be an awareness for us as parents as we do go through these things in life, that we are more aware of and checking in regularly with our kids about how they're feeling. Reaching out to professional services is not a bad thing. It's always a good thing, especially when you're going through stuff like that, just to get that extra tautoko and support.
I like that. And, you know, I mean, you've mentioned trauma as one of the biggest triggers, life traumas. Is there any correlation as well with like things like social media and technology? Is there anything that you've found that you know, technology plays a role in that as well?
Yeah, so, you know, cyberbullying is huge. And I think when we did the Tyler programs amongst the West Auckland schools, it came up very regularly. Warrior keyboards, or, you know, kids just, yeah, it's a lot different to kids these days than it was even, I know I'm going to say old saying this, but in our generation, it's completely different, the access that they have. You know, and it kind of, there's so many facets, I suppose, to this in terms of even them measuring themselves up to other social media platforms, like, am I good enough? Like, you know, seeing things that aren't real life, it becomes a really distorted view for these young people. So yeah, cyberbullying, I would say, is 100% a big issue amongst our schools. And to combat that, it's about building resilience. And that is one of the most probably key factors in this type of research that we've found that we really need to put a focus on. And from my point of view, from my particular research, it's been around whānau connection, and more importantly, parent connection, and how that can help build a young person's resilience.
I love that. Because what you're mentioning there is like, yeah, there's technology and all of that. And it's hard to kind of, I guess, change that because those are external things outside your control. But when you're talking about resilience, that's within your control, and how do you build that? And you talked about like those relationships, those connections help build that resilience. Because I can see that, especially for a kid, you know, like if things go wrong, someone's got my back. That's my family, that's my parent, that's my brother, that's my, you know, I've got that connection.
Yeah.
You know, someone's got your back, and that's so empowering, and it gives you so much confidence.
And that's the key word, is confidence, you know, like being able to be in a position. We can't control society at the moment and what the kids are having to grow up in, but we can build the confidence in them that if they are in a sticky situation or they're getting bullied, that they have that confidence to be like, no, I'm good, you know, I'm okay. I don't need to engage in this behaviour or engage in that, you know, give them that strength and resilience they need to be able to get through the hard times that are coming.
You did mention earlier around, you know, parents. I mean, you talked about like, hey, look, things happen to parents. They've got a life as well, and they've got their own grieving process, and things happen, unfortunately. And sometimes for the better. But we've got to be aware for the kids as well. I guess talking to the parents about being more self-aware, and I guess looking for the signs. I know you said it's hard to pinpoint. It's very hard to see these things, but is there anything or any tips that you can give to parents around awareness, around seeing maybe the signs early stages? Yeah,
so a lot of the parents in the interviews, they at the time they didn't really pay much attention because they were going through their own stuff. However, upon reflection, they did notice certain behaviours, and those certain behaviours were quite consistent with previous research. So it did include, obviously, isolation was a huge one, withdrawing from social groups. So we had one mum talk about her daughter did no longer found interest in kapahaka. Things that she loved and enjoyed before, she didn't want to engage in anymore. Just withdrawing, isolation. That's probably the two biggest signs, I would say, in terms of when they're kind of going through trauma is to watch out for when they kind of lock themselves in their room, they don't want to get out of bed. Normal depression signs, but I suppose, definitely something to be aware of if you're going through something like that.
Because even with that, it's still hard, eh? Like when they withdraw, they go into their room and stuff. A lot of teenagers do that already.
Yeah.
Even without it. But, you know, you mentioned there's something interesting. I mean, look at things that they were normally interested, engaged in, you know, and something's a bit off here.
Yeah. Yeah, so looking into that, I suppose another factor of that is making sure in that time you have that one-on-one time with them. And it might be you have to convince a young person to come out of the room for whatever reason. It might just, you know, like I've talked to parents and young people about simple. It doesn't have to be elaborate. Like we don't need to kind of, you know, make a big, huge deal and have a big family conference about everything. It could be you taking your son or daughter up to McDonald's for hot chocolate, one-on-one, and just having a good hour, or going for a walk around the block. Whatever you can kind of do that will interest them to have your full attention, you know, putting the phone down and just focusing on them and giving them all your attention for the hour, that they might not open up still, but they'll know that you're there and they'll see that you know, that you care. And that's, from what I've heard from the young people, that's probably the biggest way of them having any opportunity to open up about how they're actually feeling.
Because it goes back to what you said earlier, just around connection and focusing on nurturing that relationships. Because that almost seems like the foundation for strengthening resilience, you know, that social engagement. I like what you said, they keep it really simple. Yeah. Take them out to a cafe, McDonald's, spend some one-on-one time with them. Yeah. I mean, we can get so caught up in our busy lives, work, that we forget to like kind of invest. And, you know, at the end of the day, our family kind of gets a leftover sometimes, you know, so we just got to be mindful of that.
Yeah. I think a little story I'll share. I think there was a conversation around some of the young people before I started this research, and they were commenting that they'd have a bad day at school and they'd come home and they'd say, hey, mum, and mum would be busy on the laptop. Because, you know, like, to be fair, in our society as well, from the adult's point of view, we work a lot. We have to, unfortunately, to be able to pay the bills and to be able to survive. Normally, most parents are running around doing both. So just those little comments around the kids saying, oh, okay, I had a bad day, I got bullied, I come home. Mum was on the laptop, I'd go to talk to her and she'd be like, 5 more minutes. And I actually felt really guilty because I did that to my own daughter, and it really made me have a think. I was like, gosh, like, this is how much that one comment is affecting these young people, you know, and it leads them on to feeling suicide ideation, and no parent wants that, and we don't understand, I suppose, the full effect of not giving that attention. So, you know, one thing we've done with parents when we've had conversations is, you know, even doing a keyword, you know, to kind of differentiate when it's going to be serious or when it's just going to be a normal conversation about how your day was. So for me and my daughter, it was, she wanted the word Wonder Woman. She was only 13. And she said, Mum, Wonder Woman, Mum. I need the Wonder Woman, Mum. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I'd put the phone down, I'd put the laptop down, and I'd go into her room and sit with her and give her, even if it's 15, 20 minutes of my day, and okay, what's going on? And she'd get the opportunity to open up about how she was feeling. So, you know, just maybe having a key word so that you know when it's them just wanting to have a feed and ask you, you know, or tell you about their sports day, or it's actually quite serious and they need to talk to you and they need that support. So, yeah.
That's awesome. A key word. You know, and I guess that's something that you and your child or children will have to come up with, and you've got to have that relationship, eh? And
yeah.
I guess, and that's cool that you have the relationship with your daughter. You know, obviously it helps the parent understand what their role is in that situation. You're like, look, do you just need me to listen? Is this serious? Want me to give advice? Like, what is it? You know, I really like that. I guess, what are some other ways that parents can help build connections and strengthen that with their children?
Yeah. Again, it's all really basic. Time, I suppose the biggest thing that we can do in our society that we live in these days is time. And I know we don't have much time, a lot of us, because we are busy looking after kids, doing sports, you know, the daily kind of chores that we do. But it is about kind of setting a way that we like I said, like, we know when it is important, like weekly dates with your kids. 1 hour, that's it. You know, time, if you have to, schedule them into your appointment book. Hey, this is my daughter's day this week. We're going to have a Friday date night. The next week I might take my son out. That's his Friday date night. It sounds silly, but it is so important. It really is important. We're all busy, but we need to make this time for our kids and give them that attention so that they can come forward and they have an opportunity to come forward if something's bothering them. Because, you know, like with our daily lives, sometimes they don't really get that chance, or they'll feel like a burden, or they don't want to interrupt you or make you angry, so they'll just keep it to themselves, and that's where the danger comes in.
So obviously we've got parents, and, you know, you've got the father and you've got the mother, right? I guess the relationships could kind of look a little bit different.
Yeah.
From a father and a mother perspective. Are you seeing any, like, I guess, like, I'm a father, I've got children. You know, what's a key role that someone like a father could have with their children? I mean, like, that relationship with the mother, I can imagine being a little bit different, but still both providing value and connection.
Oh, it's a hard one to speak on the father's point of view, but I would honestly say the same thing. It's time. Like, literally, even the kids that I work with nowadays, the reason that I have a good relationship with a lot of the girls that I work with is purely because I'm allowed to have the time with them, just luckily in my workspace. But the results of that relationship is huge in terms of how it plays out in their lives. So, it might be that dad wants to go play basketball, and mum might want to go up the road for coffee, but dad might have a shoot around for a bit. That might be his way of engaging with his son or daughter, and then kind of having to catch up after. It's really up to you. It doesn't really matter, I think, from a youth perspective as to how or what you're doing. It's just the fact that they've got that full attention and that one bit of time just for them.
I love that. I love how you made it simple, brought it back to the basics. I mean, like, it's just about spending time with them and doing things with them and having conversations with them, making them feel safe, making them feel heard.
Yeah, and it's interesting, because I think, and I was guilty of this, like, I think sometimes as parents we overcomplicate it, like we'll get them into the best basketball team and we'll get them doing swimming and we kind of are so fixated on giving them every opportunity in life and every kind of skill that they could possibly want. And, at one point I was working ridiculous hours and I was like, I'll give them this and I'll make sure they've got this, all kind of material things, but the cost of that compared to just being able to slow it right down and to just, like, kids are very simple. Yeah. And when we as adults, we do overcomplicate it and we kind of put the bar high on what we should be giving our kids, but you can't buy time, and that's basically what it comes down to.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. I mean, like, we all want the best for our children, but sometimes we can get a little bit too extreme. Yeah. And we forget, like, this is a child. Yeah. And they need a parent, not like a coach or a... Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. The reason why I brought up the role of the father and the mother is because I was watching a YouTube video in preparation for this because I need to understand a little bit more myself. Yeah. Obviously to help with the conversation. But I watched a video of he was a Prime Minister for New Zealand, John Key. Yeah. And there was an interview with him and they asked him about this in New Zealand, the problem, because he knows and he's been involved in that work. And he talked about how they had an expert from overseas who came to New Zealand to help with the issue because New Zealand has a huge problem with suicide, especially with youth and especially among Pacifica and Māori as well. Well, anyway, this expert, somewhere from Scandinavia, Norway or Denmark, somewhere like that, but he was here in New Zealand for 2 years. And he caught up and he was doing research and all of that. And basically he told John Key, who then told everyone that was there in the audience, and said that, he said, look, what do you think from the stats here that these children have in common, the ones who committed suicide? Pacifica Māori? It's like, yes, but that's not the key theme. It's like, it's like they're young. 15, the average. And it's like, no, yes, that's a common theme, but that's not the key one. It says the most common key theme is that they didn't have a father. And I was like, what? When I heard that, I was like, well, what has that got to do with it? And he goes, yeah, it's like most of them didn't have a father. Come back to that point there around the whole divorce and stuff like that. The relationships and the key roles that each parent play in raising that children and who they become in the future as adults in development. So I thought that was quite interesting. I'm not too sure if there's anything else you could add to that, but I thought, hearing that from someone who was a Prime Minister of New Zealand saying that must, be very important. Yeah.
I think that kind of concept around the father, I mean, of course it's a huge, it's a huge gap in a child's life, but what it can do sometimes is show a reflection, or the kid could consider it as a reflection of their self-worth. And that kind of coincides with the whole resilience thing. So, when you have kids that don't, I work with oranga tamariki kids. So a lot of these children don't have any parents. And there's a lot of anger, and as you would expect, and a lot of hurt. Majority people don't really kind of understand the concept of where their emotion comes from, but as you get to know them, you kind of see the bigger picture and you get it. But over the years of my work that I've had, we have had great results, and that's despite the gap of the two parents missing or the one parent missing, normally both of them, and that's purely based around building their confidence, building their resilience. So it does make a difference 100% if a father is not engaged with their kid's life, and it's terrible and it's really sad, and for both parties, for the father that doesn't get to have the opportunity to be with the child and also the child. But it's about how do we navigate the situation so that the kid can still get most out of life and the best life that they could possibly get, knowing the circumstances. And it comes down to, from my point of view, it comes down to building up their confidence and resilience within themselves, that they can understand. And I say this to my kids a lot: you've got a mum and dad that loves you. They've just got stuff that they're dealing with, and it's not a reflection of you. And so when they comprehend that, understand that, they're not so angry, and they go, okay. As they get older, they go, okay, cool. Like mum and dad have got their own path, their own trauma. It doesn't mean they don't love me. They still love me. that's just where we are at the moment. I've got to get through this. Yeah. So resilience and confidence. It's all very simple, but it really is a simple formula, for a lot of these kids to try and help them on their way.
Yeah, I really like that, because look, life we talked about, and life happens, and sometimes a kid's not going to have both parents. And so, and I always come back to that saying, sometimes, most of the time, it's not the cards that you're dealt in life, it's how you play those cards. And we try not to let our current circumstances define our future. But look, easy said than done. Tell that to a 15-year-old who's going through a lot of depression and that. That's hard, right? And you talked about resilience. Can we talk a little bit about that? How do we help young people build resilience? Okay,
what I will share is, in the research we did, there were, I think it was 7 families, both from solo parents and from couples that were together. And, obviously the research was done around youth suicide, so they lost children. There was one, however, that survived, and this particular young person that was talked about, I would definitely say had the most trauma out of any of the kids. And he was brought up by a solo mum who had other children. And yeah, like I said, he was the only survivor despite having heavy, heavy trauma. And so when we looked at her story, what she did, we were trying to figure out what did she do so well to help this boy survive this. And again, it came down to time and attention that she had. So she was a solo mum on the DPV. So she had a lot of time, and she engaged with her kids a lot. And she tried to set a good example, and that alone built up the resilience that he needed to get through, having someone to talk to that was open, that would loved him. And that's why I keep going back to time. And it's, like I said, it's really basic, but it's really important us as parents. It doesn't matter if and unfortunately in society, a lot of us, unfortunately, do have one-parent families, or, stepdads and stepmums. So focusing on resilience built through time, encouragement, just anything you can possibly do to build them up. That's probably one of the biggest resilient factors.
I like that. Because we talked a lot about parents, and I definitely believe they play a key role in the children and nurturing them. I mean, they're the first responsibility. Yeah. But obviously, children go to schools, they go out there, parents aren't there, right? And so they've got relationships with other people, like friends, educators, education and all that. So if we may be talking to, maybe educators or social workers or people who kind of work with youth like this, what are some advice around how they can better equip themselves when dealing with youth who might be going through some challenges, especially with you working at Oranga Tamariki?
Just listen and believe them. It's again, very simple. I think, young people are just like any other people. They want to be respected as much. They'll respect you if you respect them. And I've seen this time and time again with the work that I'm in. So I have a good relationship, and we respect each other. And because of that respect, we've been able to accomplish great things with these girls. I've also seen, I suppose, some professionals that have had a different approach, and it doesn't tend to normally work out well for them. Just dismissing the young person, not really hearing them or wanting to pay attention to their concerns. Simple again, but it's huge, the impact that has on a young person by dismissing them and not believing them. Yeah, young people tell their stories a little bit, especially I suppose girls from trauma, they can elaborate sometimes on stories, but there's always some truth behind it. It stems from somewhere. So it's about being curious about that young person. Where did this come from? What's going on? Asking those questions. And that shows that you genuinely care. And that automatically gets respect from the young person. So yeah, just care and listening and try not to be dismissive, I suppose, in a professional context if you're working with young people.
Yeah, I always think of, I'm a father, got young children, and, all three of them compete for my attention.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I'll be like, hey, calm down, wait till I'm finished, But I've learned that my children need attention. They don't just want it, they need it.
Yeah.
And it comes back to when you give them attention, they feel like you love them enough to give them that time, to love them enough to listen and care about their story or what they want to share, regardless of what it is.
Yeah.
Right? They're just going to remember the feeling they had when you gave them that time and that attention, eh?
Yeah, and watch them change, and again, I'm not the perfect parent and I've had my moments as well, but watch them change when you do give them that time. I've got a young 12-year-old boy who's a bit challenging. He always, it's with girls, I've got a lot of experience. With boys, not so much. So I'm trying to get my head around boys, but he would do behaviour that was... Yeah, it was quite out the gate. Not too bad, but kind of little comments here and there, not listening. And I was like, oh man, this is such hard work. Why? And I just spent that time with him. I took my own advice and I had some one-on-ones, and the whole attitude, without me having to reiterate and tell him over and over again, do this, he wouldn't listen. As soon as I gave him a bit of time, and we had a good chat and I gave him my attention, he was an angel child for the rest of the week, and I was like, wow, it does work, with all the kids. And so you're right, it is giving them the full attention, giving them time, and it makes parenting so much easier.
Yeah, 100%. Look, as education, we're in this space where we work with a lot of businesses and employers, and we help upskill their staff, and mental health and well-being is such a big thing, and it hasn't been for a long time, but I'll say in the past 2-3 years we've seen a huge trend, an increase. We've got to look after our employees' well-being, and you've got things like financial well-being, digital well-being, emotional, social, there's all sorts of well-being, and people are starting to recognize we've got to look after our health and this as well, the mind, and and even cultural well-being. But what are you seeing, especially working with youth? Is there any resource out there that you've seen that's been really effective, especially in schools and that? I mean, we see a lot invested in workplace when people are adults. But when we're talking about prevention, and that we should be talking about early stages, not just later on when they're adults with the problems. So is there anything that you're seeing now that's happening with youth that's been very successful, that maybe education is doing really well?
There are a few organisations that I would say are doing one. One of those, I will mention them, is Northern Health School, which is Te Awa. And the reason they're so good with youth is because they take a centred, like a youth-centred approach. A lot of organisations, I might get in trouble for saying this, but they can claim to have a youth-centred approach, but unfortunately it can sometimes not be the case. But yeah, organisations like Te Awa who do have a centred approach to youth, about hearing the youth's voice, they can do amazing work. To be completely honest, there's a huge gap in New Zealand with counselling services, especially for highly traumatised youth. There's gaps everywhere, especially addiction services with youth that have been traumatized. So yeah, there's definitely some organisations out there that are doing an amazing job, and those kind of organisations come from a holistic point of view. They have psychologists, they look at education, even the work that we do in terms of mentoring, which is a job where we get to kind of guide the kids through life. We relationship build and then we guide them through. That's obviously had really great outcomes. But yeah, so there is, but then there isn't. There's a huge chunk of, resources missing for young people in New Zealand around that.
I mean, the stats speak for themselves, right?
Yeah.
But it's good that you see that there are some good examples out there that are youth-centered. When you say youth-centered, what do you mean by that? I know it's focused on the youth, but what does that look like in terms of their mahi and what they do that shows that?
again, just listening to their voice. So I'll go to a lot of meetings with organisations, and they tend to be overtaken by the adults, with the young people just sitting there quietly, really intimidated, and still with a lot of anger towards the organisations. So they don't really have the opportunity to talk, and if they do, it's kind of dismissed because they're angry still. Whereas, for example, this organisation, it's an organisation where it always starts with the youth speaking first. And it sounds silly because it's a little thing, you know, kind of getting them to talk first and lead the meeting. That's probably the best way of saying it. They lead the meeting. So they'll share what goals they have, what kind of supports they would like from the organisations. And that kind of approach, again, builds a confidence within the young person, but also gets amazing results that they're wanting. So that's...
I like that. So allow them to lead, be part of the decision making, be involved in the beginning, not just the end product or, you know, the output of the service. So that's great. That's great. If you could wave a magic wand and make something just happen like that, what would you like to see happen, or what would you change, especially in the system or whatever, to help make a difference and improve situations for our youth?
Well, I'm working on something at the moment, and then that's probably part of the gaps that I've seen with the youth, which probably the big two things is, one, the professional relationship building with youth. So that's what my PhD research is going to be focused around. So how we as professionals, like social workers, counsellors, can build stronger relationships with youth. So using all these basic tools that we've talked about. The thing that I suppose a lot of professionals don't realise is, when you focus on the relationship and you have that respect for each other, and you hear their voices, your job is so much easier. It's like 1,000,000 times easier. It's a simple formula, but I think we as adults can get kind of taken away with the fact that we just need to get it done, as opposed to looking at the process. Once you get a young person on board, the outcomes, they're huge. And you've just got to get their buy-in. That's all it is. You get their buy-in by building that relationship, letting them lead, and you support them. And once that process happens, like I said, I've seen lives literally change. I've seen kids that have been the first to graduate out of anyone in their family, you know, and these are kids that they never thought, you know, it's great seeing these parents come along to the graduations, and it might be a small graduation. Like, we had a young girl, she graduated and she's now a qualified hairstylist. She's 19 and she'll be working down in one of the Rodney Waynes. But her mum's face that day, it was priceless, you know, and these are the outcomes that we want for our young people. And they are achievable. It's just about, instead of focusing on the tick boxes and on the getting to the end, it's about, let's look at the process. Let's make my job easier as a professional. And let's do that by listening to this young person and helping them, and really genuinely wanting to support them along the way. Yeah. I
love that. Some great thing there that you're working on, and I can't wait to see it, especially with your PhD and what comes from it. But look, we come towards the end of our podcast, and it's been a very enjoyable conversation. I've learned a lot, and I'm very grateful for your time. We're better for it. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners will gain a lot of value and insight, especially parents, around the youth and this issue around suicide prevention. But I guess before we wrap up the podcast, I've got 2 questions left for you.
Yeah.
One, speaking to our parents out there who might be worried about this, you know, especially with their children, might be happening now, or they might worried about the future. What are some encouragement and words of advice you'd like to give to the parents?
It's definitely to seek professional help. So go see your doctor. If you're really concerned, go see your doctor. Go reach out for counselling services, whether it be at school or your own kind of avenue. If there's an immediate, obviously, concern, and I know it might sound extreme, but don't ever take anything lightly in terms of, teen suicide. Take them to the emergency department, take them straight down if it's an emergency concern. That's probably all I can say around that, is to just be aware, and to also and to take in that time with your kid and know how important it can be and how much of a preventative factor it can be at that time. So all of those things together, professional services, seeing your GP, and probably the last thing I'd say, and this is part of the research we did, a lot of the parents had issues because they saw that their kids were withdrawing. They saw these signs. No one was listening. Don't stop pushing. If you really believe that your kid is not in a good place, he or she is not acting like normal, there's been a traumatic event in your lives at the current time and you're very concerned, don't stop yelling. Don't stop telling people, I need help, like she needs help. Just keep going until someone listens, because it's horrible and traumatic to find that these parents, some of them did yell for support and no one listened. And it's, they didn't get the scale, the scales that they do, or the assessments that they do to kind of see how high risk they are. And your kids better than anyone, any therapist, your child. And if you really believe that something's not right, don't stop protecting them and do what you need to do to make sure they're okay.
Love it. Thank you so much for that. Some great advice. And if people want to get a hold of you, get in touch with you, interested in your work, how can they do that?
We've got a website coming out soon, but you can always search me up on LinkedIn and just under my name and flick me a message. We will be having kind of workshops around suicide that we're looking at presenting, and also some professional development for social workers and counsellors dealing with youth. So probably I'd probably say LinkedIn is probably the most easiest way to get hold of us, or Facebook on our Tali Tonu Te Kaha is what our organisation will be called.
Love it. And we'll put a link somewhere in the bio as well, in the description. But look, again, Birgette, thank you so much. You've blessed us with your time, your knowledge, your wisdom. It's been a huge gift to us, and just having you on the show. And, we wish you all the best with your mahi, especially with your PhD, and much love to you and your whānau.
Cool.
So thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much.